of Simply Real Estate with host Todd C. Slater on News Talk 1010.
And welcome back. If you're just tuning in, my guest this hour is His Worship John Tory, Mayor of Toronto. This is Minutes with the Mayor. Unfortunately, he's giving me a little bit more time than just a few minutes, and I really do appreciate his time. Mr. Mayor, just before the break, we were talking about some of the incentives that you're working with for the Toronto community housing. And of course, when we talk about supply and demand, one of the things that a lot of the developers are struggling with, of course, is red tape. When people are thinking, when they start planning to build a building, it can take up to 10 years before they actually get to break ground. When we spoke in the summer, you talked about, making and trying to streamline this process. How are we making out?
Slower than I would like. The city staff would tell you, Todd, that I'm very impatient about this because, and I've set a litmus test. I'll be very clear on it because I would never not say something to the public through your program that I wouldn't say to them, which is that by the end of this year, 2020, we've done a full review of the process. We've seen that there's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of instances where 10 city departments, quite rightfully and justifiably, have to comment on something, but they have this system people can only imagine as they listen out there, where this document sort of about a proposed development goes around and around and around. Sure. And it just keeps going around. And then if it sits on somebody's desk because they're on holidays for 2 weeks, and people may say, well, what's 2 weeks? Well, the 10 years you referred to, I think that doesn't happen very often, but it certainly is 4 and 5 regularly. Sure. That is 5 years during which we are being denied the increase in supply to the housing stock. It is 5 years in which the people who've put their money up to build that housing are paying interest on what they paid to buy the land. It's 5 years in which they're paying planners and lawyers and others to be doing their work. And so I want that to be shortened up without sacrificing the quality of decision making we're making so that we can build a good city, a high quality city. So they're working at eliminating a lot of that circulation of documents that go around. And of course, one of the answers to that is technology, so that you can look at something on a screen and stroke a key and be done with it, as opposed to some piece of paper. There's still a lot of pieces of paper floating around City Hall, and that shouldn't be the case anymore. So I will only say to you that I am very mindful of this challenge, and that it does relate very much to what we were talking about earlier, which is increasing the supply of housing. I want to encourage people to invest in housing in Toronto, not have them scared off by the fact it takes 5 years or longer. So I will be expecting to see changes, and I will be looking for input, including from people who listen to the show and people like you, as to whether, look, it's not going to be resolved overnight to the point where it's a 5-minute approval, nor should it be. But I want people to be saying by the end of this year, 2020, I've noticed a difference. There are things you've done that have made it easier. Greg Lintern is well aware, and he's working very hard to make sure that that we meet that test of having change that is perceptible by the end of the year.
One of the things that, of course, when we talk about marketplace affordability, we talk about rents all the time. And when we talk about being able to find more rental properties, laneway housing, basement apartments. What's your take on this? Because, I believe that in Toronto proper, we've got a lot of properties here that, could actually, probably, reduce our vacancy issue a little.
You are so right about that. And one of the things we have to get over in this city, and it's one of the things where I'm prepared to invest some political capital because it's sometimes a controversial issue. People think, well, if you allow and encourage on a broad basis basement apartments, if you allow and encourage secondary suites, if you allow and encourage laneway housing, that somehow this is going to negatively impact on the character of neighborhoods. That is not true. And we have to open our minds to the fact that, because the very same people sometimes would say, well, I don't want a high-rise building anywhere near me. Well, part of the answer to saying that it doesn't have to be all high-rise buildings is in the thousands of potential units, which, by the way, could help a senior stay in their home financially. It could do a whole lot of things. It'll keep neighborhoods lively because you'll have more people. And yes, there are things we have to worry about, like the parking of cars and this kind of thing. But in the end, we have a fast-growing city, the fastest growing in North America. And that's a sign of great success and confidence people have in the city. But we simply have to have a place for people to live. It shouldn't all be high-rise buildings. And it can be, and I think is going to have to be, other kinds of housing. So laneway housing is one that is now permitted. I hope more people will take advantage. We've had a very limited number of people so far, but I think people can view this as a huge opportunity for them, a huge opportunity to create additional housing, but do it in a way that is not going to change the character of neighborhoods. It's a growing city, and we have to take account of that and be flexible in our thinking to a certain extent.
Yeah. One of the things that we've noticed, and when there was a study done, that a lot of the baby boomers, they are living longer, healthier. They're not leaving their primary residence, that they've been there for years. But of course, they're not using the full residence. And one of the conversations and one of the things that I was going to propose is the fact that, if we take a look at how advantageous, that secondary suite can actually be, if we were actually able to do a severance, go more towards even a registration of it being a legal entity, here's what happens. Reverse mortgages are not necessarily a positive thing for seniors. I think that,
Well, you can live longer than the money lasts.
Well, exactly.
The equity.
But if we took a look and said, hey, listen, you know what, why don't we create 2 suites? One you could actually sell. You can gain the money from it. It's actually more affordable. You can get more land transfer tax for the city. You're going to have, more taxes being paid entirely. But on top of that, this is going to give people the leg up, that first-time home buyer. So yes, they're buying a basement suite, but the senior that's decided to stay still has their primary residence. They still have all the equity in that part of the home, but they've now unlocked some of the equity without going to the reverse, and they're also not making that monthly payment. So it's going to make it more affordable for the long term.
These are the kinds of concepts we have to open our minds to. And a lot of the resistance doesn't come from politicians. It does not come from even regulators like planners at the city.
Right.
It comes from local residents who say, oh, well, if you have that house across the street divided in 2, in effect, and you have 2 owners,
like a duplex,
it's somehow going to cause a problem. But the fact is, if you really, really think about it, there are streets in Toronto today that years ago were all duplexes and now aren't. And if they went back that way, the houses don't look any different. Half the time you go in the same front door, but then there's 2 doors inside. Yep. So from the standpoint of somebody who's looking across the street at their neighbor, they wouldn't even know. And I just think it has all the benefits you talked about. So those kinds of concepts are things like secondary suites, like laneway housing, that we have to open our minds to and say, in a city that's growing as fast as ours, if we want to have it as a place that everybody can have a chance to live, then, and if we want seniors to stay in their homes, which every single study has shown as a positive thing, then we have to open our minds to options that we might not have thought about before. But strangely enough, a lot of them are going back to the future. Turning something back into a duplex that was a duplex.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with it, and you have to watch over it, and we have to keep an eye on it to make sure it's done properly. But that's where we're going to have to go. There's no question about that.
This is an incredible city. It is a world-class city, and speaking of it being a world-class city, of course, one of the biggest drivers of Canada's real estate market is Toronto. RBC released just the other day a comment that they're a little bit concerned that we're starting to see a little bit of that froth returning, and
I ask every day.
And one of the things I'm always I try to caution our listeners, because headlines can kind of drive a market, and I would have to say, listen, no matter what, Toronto is always going to be the apple of people's eye. And people are always going to want to live in Toronto, and why shouldn't they? We've got so much to offer here. So the idea that they automatically say, oh, we're going to run out of control, we're going to start seeing these crazy bidding offers. I think the fact that the stress test did have a very positive effect. I know not a lot of people like it, but I believe it was very positive. Implementing the foreign buyer tax. Again, not everybody liked it, but again, it did control the market a little bit. I think we've got a little bit more of a cautionary, buyer out there today.
Yeah, and I think that, look, when we sat down, it was Bill Morneau, myself, and Charles Sousa at the time, Ontario Finance Minister, and decided when there was some froth, I think, and when there was a real concern about the market, what could we do to kind of cool it off a bit but not kill it? And I think we did fairly well, and that's not to congratulate ourselves, but I think we did fairly well, the tools mostly from the other governments, at doing that. I ask every day, when I said I ask every day, I ask anybody I run into, I would ask you, anybody who knows a lot more than I do about real estate, is the market still fundamentally healthy and being driven largely by demand? Because there's 70,000 people coming here every year, and people say to me they believe the fundamentals are still strong. The minute I start getting people to say to me, no, it's frothy, then I will obviously raise that concern with the provincial and federal governments and ourselves. But I think at the moment it's more about what we started talking about this morning, which is to increase supply, to really put the incentives in place to do that, to keep an eye on the market as it works, the rental and the ownership market, but to keep increasing supply. I think that also requires a lot of people to think carefully about their previous opposition to mid-rise and low-rise development on a lot of our arterial streets where we have transit, because people say, I don't want anything, I just want it to stay exactly the way it is. Well, you can't have 70,000 people come to a city and have things stay exactly as they've been.
Sure.
So I think we have to talk about the laneway housing, the secondary suites, the duplexes, the concepts like you talked about for joint ownership, and things like low-rise and mid-rise in places where it hasn't been before, but tastefully done. We've seen many examples across the city where it looks, after it's done, you'd sort of say, gosh, it always looked this way, didn't it? It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, one of the things is that you're going to have pride of ownership, people that, and one of the important things people have to remember is that when you have ownership, normally the houses look a lot better. And, sometimes, because we do have landlords out there that aren't taking care of the properties. But when people actually buy these properties, they actually own the title, you'll find that there's a lot more pride in them.
Home ownership, if you think about it, I mean, home ownership is so important in the context of that, but it's also important in the context that if you look at everybody's finances nowadays, when they talk about everybody's credit card bills and so on, the one thing a lot of people have going for them is they have for years and years paid down their mortgage and own their home if they're age 70 or something. Sure. And so it represents for them a degree of financial security they might not otherwise have from pensions. Some people don't have a pension, but they do have their homes. And so you have the options of dealing with that, living in it for as long as you want, at relatively low cost if we can keep taxes down. But you also have the option of selling it. You have the option of, as you said earlier on, it's not perfect device, but borrowing against it. I hope you might one day have the option of saying, let's create 2 units out of this so that you can get some income from it. But the bottom line is that home ownership is a very, very positive thing. Now, it's not going to be for everybody, but for a lot of people, I think it represents that kind of bedrock foundation of their finances. And it's something for people to aspire to as well. So I just think we have to keep that in mind as we sort of say, well, all right, for a senior who may not be able to stay in their home, if you don't give them some flexibility to create a suite, duplex it in some way or whatever, then that's not a good thing. So that's why we have to think outside the box. I mean, it's not that outside the box, but we have to think a little differently about these things also in terms of increasing supply. We kept secondary suites out of Airbnb under our regulations that are being challenged in court. Why? Not because we wanted to deny people the opportunity to rent out more rooms, but because we needed those for long-term tenants. Yep. And this is, we have to keep thinking about places for people to live in the long term as tenants, and good places to live. Living in a house that has a secondary suite is a nice place to live in a nice neighborhood. You can't do better than that. No, excellent. Well, Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank you for coming in today. It's been a real privilege having you here, and definitely, keep up the great work. And I trust you're going to call me. If you see any sign of that froth, you make sure to call me or call me out on the air, okay? I certainly want to hear about it from you and from your listeners, who are people that obviously care about real estate, as we all should. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks, Todd. Okay, thank you. I have to thank Mayor Tory for coming in. Wow, what a fabulous interview, and I really, really enjoy his time. You know what? It's really tough to be able to get time with the mayor, and it's a real honor to have him on the show. And you know what? Just down to earth and great to talk to. And again, some positive things that are happening, obviously, in the Toronto market. So we're going to keep our eyes on that, and hopefully Mayor Tory will take me up on my offer to be able to do some work with him if they need to, I don't know, maybe, my 2 cents. Not that it's going to be worth much more than that, but anyways, I also want to thank Dave Butler. Always great to talk to Dave. He's just living and breathing the market, knowing exactly what's going on in the mortgage world. So that's it. Wow, how fast did this hour go by? Unbelievable. I just want to thank Ian Andre. They keep it simple every single week. And most importantly, I want to thank you for sharing your Sunday with me. Always a pleasure. And remember, I'm back next Sunday at noon, as usual. I'm your host, Todd C. Slater. You've been listening to Simply Real Estate right here on News Talk 1010.
Thanks for listening to Simply Real Estate with Todd C. Slater on News Talk 1010.
You're going to love the Hyundai display at the Canadian International Auto Show in Toronto. And there's more to love during our I Love Winter sales event. Get no-charge all-wheel drive on all Kona, Tucson, and Santa Fe SUVs. Or don't pay for 90 days on models like the Elantra. Plus, get amazing available heated and safety features. Visit us at the Auto Show February 14th to 23rd to check out the entire Hyundai lineup and learn about our Air Miles Reward Miles program offers. Conditions apply. Visit HyundaiCanada.com, your dealer, or our booth at the Auto Show for details.
You don't buy office chairs from the back of a truck, get suits from the Dollar Mart. Reuse yesterday's coffee, buy an office that's falling apart. You don't hire an intern as your CEO, raccoons to clear your trash. Treat clients to a fast food lunch, use dial-up to save some cash. You get what you pay for, so be careful what you choose. Use original HP toner, and you just can't lose. 100% reliable, environmentally responsible. Always trust original HP toner.
When weather hits, rain and sleet can dangerously block your visibility as you drive. But the Michelin Man is on your side, protecting you with Michelin Stealth Wiper Blades. With exclusive SmartFlex technology, these blades flex to the curve of your windshield, giving you the best wipe possible, delivering streak-free performance for clear vision and safer driving. So when weather hits, be ready. Michelin Wiper Blades. It doesn't get any clearer than this. Available at Costco and other fine retailers.
This is Toronto's breaking news. Traffic and weather. News Talk 1010. CFRB AM. An iHeart radio station. Your 1 o'clock news starts now.